You are standing on the shore of a lake in what is now northern Kenya. It is roughly 10,000 years ago. The water is low, food is scarce, and the group of people walking toward you does not want to talk. Within minutes, most of the people around you are dead. This is not a myth. This is not a guess. This is Nataruk, a real archaeological site discovered in 2012, and it may be the oldest direct evidence of human warfare ever found. So when did war actually begin? Not war as a metaphor, not a schoolyard scuffle blown out of proportion. Organized group-on-group violence with intent to kill. For a long time, historians assumed the answer was simple. War came with civilization. Cities need walls, walls need enemies. No cities, no war. Small bands of hunter-gatherers, the thinking went, were too scattered, too busy surviving to bother killing each other. Nataruk broke that assumption apart. At Nataruk, researchers led by paleoanthropologist Marta Mirazan-Lar found the remains of at least 27 individuals. 10 of the skeletons showed clear signs of violent trauma, blunt force wounds to the skull, a projectile point embedded in a chest cavity. One skeleton had its hands positioned as if they had been bound before death. Let's decode that for a second. A projectile point is simply a small, sharpened piece of stone hafted onto a wooden shaft, exactly the kind of thing you'd use in an arrow or a spear. Finding one lodged inside a rib cage is about as direct as evidence gets. This was not an accident. This was not a hunting mishap. This was people killing people in a group. And Nataruk is not alone. Travel north and back in time to Jebel Sahaba in modern Sudan, a site excavated originally in the 1960s and re-examined with modern forensic methods in 2021. More than 60 skeletons dated to around 13,000 years ago. Many showed multiple embedded stone points, healed fracture patterns from old wounds, and injuries consistent with repeated, sustained conflict. Not a single isolated raid. Repeated conflict. Not one bad day, a pattern. Now widen the picture even further. In the Ohalo II site in Israel, dated to around 23,000 years ago, researchers have found some of the earliest known brush hut dwellings, alongside evidence of organized seasonal hunting camps. That kind of organization matters here because it tells you something important. These were not disconnected wanderers bumping into each other by accident. These were structured groups, with territory, with routines, with something worth defending. And anywhere you find people defending territory, you eventually find people willing to take it. Archaeologist Lawrence Keeley, in his influential study of prehistoric warfare, compared casualty rates across dozens of tribal societies and ancient skeletal populations. His conclusion was blunt. By percentage of population killed in conflict, many small-scale societies suffered violence at rates far higher than 20th century industrial warfare. Not because prehistoric people were more evil, because there was no police force, no treaty, no international body to step in and stop a conflict once it started. Every dispute had to resolve itself, one way or another, inside the group. So here's the question you're probably already asking. Why? Why would small groups of people with no kings, no cities, no grand strategy choose to kill each other? Anthropologists point to a handful of answers, and none of them are as simple as humans are naturally violent. Resource scarcity is one. Nataruk sits near what was once a shrinking lake system. When water and food contract, competition between neighboring groups intensifies. A drought doesn't just threaten your harvest, it threatens your children's next meal. And desperate groups make desperate choices. Revenge cycles are another. Anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon spent decades studying conflict patterns among the Yanomamo people of the Amazon and found something striking. Violence often didn't erupt over resources at all. It spread through retaliation. A killing demanded a killing. One raid became the justification for the next, and the cycle could outlive the original grievance entirely. And then there's a harder truth. One archaeologist, Stephen LeBlanc, has argued for years humans have almost never lived in the peaceful, conflict-free state of nature that 18th century philosophers imagined. Wherever we find prehistoric skeletal populations in enough detail, a striking percentage show violent trauma. Not universally, not everywhere equally, but far more often than the old peaceful past myth allowed for. So let's reconstruct what a moment like Nataruk might have actually looked like. You are part of a small band, maybe 20 or 30 people. You know every face around you. You have hunted together, shared food during lean months, raised children side by side. Then, another group starts appearing near your water source. At first, it's just tension. Sideways glances, a dispute over a fishing spot. Then someone from your group turns up dead. Now every decision changes. Do you retreat? Do you strike first? Do you try one more time to negotiate? There is no chief to decide for you. No army to call in. Just your own group, weighing survival against restraint. In real time, with no framework anyone has written down yet. Because nothing has been written down yet. Notice what you don't have. You don't have a general drawing up a battle plan on a map, because maps don't exist yet. You don't have a warrior class trained from childhood in combat, because full-time soldiers require a food surplus large enough to support people who don't hunt or gather. What you have instead is every able adult forced to decide in the same terrible instant whether they are now a fighter. That absence of specialization is exactly why so much of this violence looks improvised. And yet, according to the bone evidence, strangely effective. A stone-tipped spear thrown by someone who has spent a lifetime hunting antelope does not need a battlefield to be lethal. The same skill that fed your children last winter is the skill that kills the group standing across the water from you today. That is the terrifying part. Every rule of war you might picture, laws of engagement, treaties, uniforms, chains of command, none of it exists. There is only the raw calculus of fear and hunger. Here is the counterintuitive twist. We tend to picture prehistoric violence as chaotic and impulsive, a sudden burst of rage. But the evidence at Jebel Sahaba suggests something colder. Bound hands. Multiple embedded points per victim, meaning attackers didn't stop after one wound. Patterns consistent with ambush, not open confrontation. This wasn't a spontaneous brawl. This looks organized, planned. Which means the instinct toward strategic, premeditated violence may be older and more deeply wired than most people assume. And that reframes the entire question. We often ask why humans go to war as if war is a strange deviation from some naturally peaceful baseline. The archaeological record suggests the opposite question might be more honest. Why, given how often the ingredients for conflict have existed everywhere, have humans developed so many ways to avoid it? Because we have. Diplomacy, trade agreements, marriage alliances between rival groups, shared rituals designed specifically to diffuse tension before it turns lethal. These aren't modern inventions bolted onto a violent species. They may be just as old, just as essential to survival, as the violence itself. For every Nataruk, there were countless neighboring groups who negotiated instead, who traded instead, whose skeletons show no trauma at all, because they found another way through. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Hadza of Tanzania, have documented exactly this second path in action. Disputes over hunting grounds are common. Outright lethal conflict is rare. Why? Because the Hadza maintain wide, flexible social networks across dozens of camps. so that almost anyone can walk into almost any other camp and be fed, sheltered, and included. When belonging isn't scarce, killing a stranger over resources becomes far less necessary. The lesson from Nataruk is not that humans are doomed to violence. It's that violence becomes far more likely the moment a group closes in on itself, and far less likely the moment it opens back up. Which brings this back to you, right now, in a world you actually recognize. Every group you belong to, a workplace, a family, a community, a nation, still runs on this exact same tension. Scarcity versus cooperation, old grievances versus new agreements. The instinct to strike first versus the harder, slower work of trust. The tools have changed almost beyond recognition. The instinct underneath them has not. So the next time you watch two countries negotiate a fragile peace, or two co-workers put aside a grudge for the sake of the team, remember what you saw on that lakeshore in Kenya. The impulse toward violence is ancient, but so is the impulse to choose something else. You are still standing on that shore. The lake is low, the food is scarce, and the group across the water is close enough to see. The only real question left is which choice you make next.